Hello, I'm David D. Cosmo, and this is People, Places, and Things. We've been traveling throughout the region to introduce you to the individuals, the institutions, the industry, and the attractions that make our area unique. Our history is important too, and today's program is all about the history of a town in Lackawanna County that no longer exists. It is the ghost town of Edgerton. This is the only known picture of the town of Edgerton. On the far right you can see the schoolhouse. Toward the center in the back is the breaker, the lifeblood of what was the Edgerton community. And of course the houses all around the small town, most of those I'm sure company homes. If you want to find out about the town of Edgerton, you probably ought to talk with one of these gentlemen, Joe Kernitsky and Dale Ketlock. They were involved in a project in writing a book about the community of Edgerton. They're overlooking a spot right now that was a key spot in that community. Why was this such an important spot?
Well, the folks from East German would come up the Edgerton Road past where Aylesworth Park is right now, and they'd come up and visit, and this was the only property here. So they were people that came, they immigrated from the Eastern Europe, and I do have a picture of the castle garden where they first lived, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And then they got a job up here, and they come here and had a beer or two, if I can say that, and they enjoyed themselves on Sunday afternoons. Right over to my left they had an orchard, and over to the right is where he had his barns and his horses and chickens and all the animals. And to my left over down there, they also had a dirt cellar, which they took the ice from the creek and deposited in the cellar, and they covered over with bark and leaves and probably some evergreen branches, and preserved the foods for the summer.
There was a hotel here. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that hotel.
This is the Schifonius Schust Stone House. It remained until the year 1924, but was in existence during the coal mining era in Edgerton. And at one time they sold some beer and shoes, but never any groceries. They called it a hotel.
Joe, how important was a hotel to a little town like this?
It was very important because when they came and worked up at the mines, and there were several saloons up there, but they came down here because they knew the folks more than they would know the people working up at the mines.
So was this a community gathering spot?
Gathering, right. Mm-hmm.
And what happened to that hotel eventually?
Well, when the Edgerton closed down in 1905, they remained here until the early 20s, and I guess they just tore it down, and that was the end of it.
Dale, you said this was also the site of a big fire. What happened?
There was 8 properties up here, and somewhere around 1898, again we found it by accident on the microfilm, there was a large fire, and it consumed all the buildings but one. The one that it didn't wasn't insured. It was in the middle, and the fire leaped over the top of the other buildings and caught all the rest of them on fire, and they burned right to the ground. There was another general store, there was a bottling works, and a couple other buildings, and the one in the middle had no insurance, and that was spared. There was not even a mark of the flame on it, but they were burned right to the ground. And like I said, we found it by accident. It was on the microfilm, and it was reported up and down the valley. It was widely known, and the huge fire at Edgerton last week, the way it showed up in the paper.
Were most of the buildings up here owned by the coal company?
These buildings here, private, were not. They were owned by private owners. The homes in the town, which we're going to see in a little bit, they were owned by the coal company. And once they shut the coal works down in 1905, they tore the homes down and probably sold the wood. And they were rebuilt, not in their same shape and same form, but they were rebuilt down in German and Mayfield.
So actually, some of the homes that were in Edgerton really still exist today, but not in Edgerton.
That is correct. Yes, there's 2 or 3 that we know for sure. There's one in Mayfield on May Street and one in German on Hudson Street or Delaware Street that we know for sure. And there's probably a few more around. Again, they weren't built the same way they were up here, but they were built from the same wood. Wood was scarce, it was expensive, so they figured why waste it? You know, let's reuse it again. And they did.
Joe, tell me what we're looking at here, what you know about 1900 in Edgerton.
Well, this tells you about the all the people that lived up in Edgerton, and of course we have some of the petitions where they were born. Am I right, Dave? And I don't know. This census tells us about there were about 200 to 300 families up there in Edgerton.
And were they mainly associated with the mines?
Strictly. Mining. Just mining. And
Was this the last census involving Edgerton?
it was. June the 4th
And after this, Edgerton disappeared.
in 1905.
Joe, what are we seeing in this photo?
Well, this is the main pillar of the breaker. The breaker consisted of about 7 to 8 tiers high up into the mountainside. So that is the real foundation for the beginning of the breaker and the opening. And right above it, it had railroad track lines running on a trestle on the top and the bottom, where they would load the cars of coal on top, and the empty ones would be on the bottom.
So the coal that was mined in Edgerton was actually processed in this breaker and then hauled
Correct.
away by railroad.
It went on through the D&H Railroad, and when they had problems with the coal, they used to take care of it up at the Powderly Breaker in Carbondale. And then went on to the main line of D&H and on to Market.
Well, Dale, obviously Edgerton was a coal town, but how did it all get started?
Well, it actually started by the man named John Hosey. He came over here. He was a breed of person that doesn't exist anymore. He came over at 12 years old from Scotland, and he wanted to break free from his parents, and he wanted to be independent. And they didn't want him to go, so they said, well, we'll send you, we'll let you go if you go with your older brother. Well, he came over here, and he first started working in the New York City area on the rocks and the quarries and stuff. And he came here, and he got into the coal business. He discovered coal up there probably in the 1850s, and him and his sons ran it. But he did die in 1881, 2 years before the town started. So he actually never did see Edgerton, but it was because of all his work up there that the town began. When he died, he had holdings in coal companies as far away down as Nanticoke and below. And I think the state of Virginia even owed him money. He did some work down there for them. So he's a very entrepreneurial type of guy.
Although Edgerton was a small community, it was thriving in a lot of ways, including Dale Entertainment. Who are these folks?
Well, there was a man named Anton Vrabel who lived up there, and he started what was called the Edgerton Drum Corps. And these young boys belonged to it. We don't have any names on them, but the pictures belong to a guy down in Washington, D.C., who sent us copies to put in the book. But that was taken in front of the company store, and all that's left now is a little foundation up there. And they pose. And you can see in the window, the reflection there was homes on the opposite side of the street. You can see a picket fence on the left side of the picture there. You could also see some people, probably the coal company owners, in the window on the right. And they're young boys, probably 10, 12 years old, maybe younger.
Most people don't even know that Edgerton existed, do
Truly,
they?
very true.
You decided to write a book. Why was it so important for you to write about Edgerton?
Well, when I traveled up here at the age of about 12 years old, I used to come up with my parents, and we would pick blueberries, and every time we passed through this town, they would talk about Edgerton, and I was so inspired about it. And then later on, I became about 14 or 15. My family had a bakery business, and I distributed food, baked goods from Simpson all the way down to Jessup. And I would talk to the people that knew about Edgerton or lived up here at its end time, and they'd tell me the stories about it, and I'd jot it down. And then I also had the sons of the hotel here would come to me on Sunday afternoons and speak and tell me about Edgerton. I jotted it all down, and it just got me interested, and I said, I have to complete this project. So now we're writing a book on Edgerton, and I think it's going to be labeled Edgerton, the Blessed Town of Edgerton.
Dale, Edgerton's become quite a project, and it includes the book, but it also includes some original music. How'd that happen?
Well, I'm a ham radio operator, and I was talking to somebody on the radio about the town, and a guy jumped in, a songwriter, and he said, hey, what's this Edgerton town you're talking about? And I told him, and he said, I'd be interested in writing a song about it. Well, we took him on a tour, and he took notes. Probably the only person I remember taking notes as we're giving a tour. And I knew him a while. I knew he could write songs, and good songs. I didn't know how good or how fast. Well, he wrote that song and 5 others. He wrote 6 songs about it. And he even has one about the Breaker Boys. He has one little Johnny Luxmore in it, the little boy who drowned. And he played them at our projects that we did. And he actually had people with tears in their eyes.
Can we hear one?
We certainly can.
Joe, what were we looking at now? What's this all about?
Well, we're looking here on the site of the pay shack is right over to my left, and the company storehouse, company office was over on that end, and over here to my left over also was the mule barn, and there was the superintendent's office here, and the mine boss offices and foreman, and the pay shack. And when they paid in silver dollars. They received silver dollars. It was they wouldn't accept, they called that wallpaper money. They didn't want that.
Of course, with all communities, there are triumphs and there are tragedies. This is the scene of one of the major tragedies here in Edgerton.
All right, we're at the site of the Luxmore family. Their home is to my right, and back further in the backyard, Mrs. Luxmore was baking bread in an outdoor oven. So I had her son Johnny with him. He was 5 years old, and his sister Viola was 3 years old. So they were playing around the oven there, and Mother was baking bread. All of a sudden, little Viola mentioned to her mother that John ran towards the creek where we are standing now. So she came running to the